Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the February meeting of Cabinet. I'm Councillor Ashley Baxter, Leader of the Council and Chair of this committee. Alongside me to my left is Councillor Paul Stokes, the Deputy Leader. To my right is Karen Bradford, Chief Executive, and to her right is Graham Watts, our Monitoring Officer. We have other officers and members of Cabinet and members of Council in the room. You're all very welcome. Please ensure your mobile phones are switched off or turned to silent. I have not been notified of a fire alarm practice, but if the alarm does sound, please leave by the nearest available exit and move swiftly to the green outside here on St Peter's Hill. If you wish to ask a question or make a comment, please indicate by raising your hand. I will take Cabinet members first, and I'll invite if members of the Council beyond Cabinet want to make comments. They're very welcome to do so, as long as they are brief and clear and considerate. Yeah. The meeting will be recorded and can be watched as a live stream now. Live. We are live on SKDC Public Eye website. Recordings are made and they can later be viewed on the Council's website or on SKDC YouTube channel. Please be aware that the finance update and draft budget proposals are available within a supplement to the agenda. I'm planning to move item 6, which concerns the Grantham Mears Leisure Centre, to the bottom of the agenda to make it the last item on the agenda because it has pink papers and because one of the Cabinet is likely to need to probably to leave the room, although we can talk about that later on. Also today, I want to mention, and it's mentioned the elephant in the room, I guess, of local government reorganisation. Finally, we had the letter from Jim McMahon, MP, who is the relevant minister, about local government reorganisation. It was promised as early in January. It arrived last week. I've had informal discussions before the letter and some more informal discussions after the letter with leaders of neighbouring authorities. Ms Bradford and I went to Peterborough this morning to talk about their approach to local government reorganisation. I've spoken to Gail Waller today, who is the leader at Rutland County Council, to listen to what she says about reorganisation, and I'm meeting with all the leaders of Lincolnshire authorities on Friday to hear what they say about local government reorganisation. There will be opportunity at our next full council for all our SKDC councillors to share their thoughts about local government reorganisation in a constructive and positive way. I understand that somebody wanted to make a comment at this point. It was Phil Dilks.
Thank you, Leader, and support what you're doing, talking to other council leaders to see where we might go. I've got to say, from my point of view, I've read the letter that came, was it 8 weeks late, and is demanding that we come up with a solution, our solution, within 6 weeks. And that solution has to include other councils to make us a council together, or a local authority together, that will be at least 3 times bigger than the current South Kesteven District Council, which is 147,000 or thereabouts residents, and that the minimum is going to be 500, half a million, to find a new home. Now, to me, that is taking the word local out of local government, and both parties, both major parties, for many years have talked about devolution, making decision-making closer to the people whose lives are affected by those decisions. This is the reverse of that. It is turning devolution on its head, in my personal view. We have to sort of do what you're doing and make sure that we get the best for our residents, those residents that we represent, and I'm sure that we'll be doing that. But the letter from the government does basically, as colleagues have said, instructs us to sign our own suicide note, and explain why we think that the solution that we come up with is going to be better for the residents that we represent. Well, from my point of view, it doesn't and it won't. And I think the most important thing that I want to say out of the next few weeks is how we consult with our residents, because, you know, it's just crucial that our residents are properly consulted on what happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. I think you say a lot of what other people are thinking. Councillor Kesteven.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with everything that Councillor Dilks has just said. It is ridiculous for us to be asked to collude in our own demise, isn't it? And obviously the deadline is ridiculously tight, unacceptably so, especially given that we're 8 weeks late getting the letter from the Minister. I think that's unacceptable. And again, the 500,000 is frankly ridiculous. There are no London boroughs of 500,000. Are the government going to force London boroughs to merge with each other? Or the 32 existing unitary authorities in Scotland? I don't think any of those are for 500,000. So why are we being picked on in this way? It is ridiculous. And it's unfair. I would like to say, as a Stamford County Councillor and District Councillor, obviously we look very strongly towards Rutland. We have a lot of shared interests with Rutland, and we have dysfunctional boundaries with Rutland. And so we hope that there will be some very, very constructive conversations with Rutland County Council. There's a strong opinion, I understand, that Leicestershire is not their chosen home, and I hope that we can come to a satisfactory arrangement with them in terms of the future governance around the Stamford area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pretty sure we're not going to hear anybody gushing with enthusiasm for the task that we've been set over the next 6 weeks. It is interesting to read the letter from the Government Minister, where it says, and I quote, "New unitary structures should enable stronger community engagement." It's very interesting that they are presuming that this structure will be favoured following any engagement with our communities. Deliver genuine opportunity for neighbourhood empowerment. Again, I can't think of anything less empowering for our communities than for the centre of decision making to be moved further away from people's homes. Proposals will need to explain plans to make sure that communities are engaged. And once again, this puts the cart before the horse, because it suggests that the proposal that we have to submit in under 6 weeks now should have a clearly thought through community engagement plan, perhaps informed by community engagement. This council have done community engagement very, very well recently, but 6 weeks is not long enough to get something of this magnitude put through. It's nowhere near sensible for a decent consultation. And at the end of the day, what of those residents who simply want us to get on with making sure that the bins are collected, the homeless are housed, and that all of our services are delivered, rather than sucking the air out of the room with this conversation? But the final thing that I would say is another direct quote. Proposals should set out how an area will seek to manage transition costs. So we are being asked to undergo this extensive and very, very technical change, and being told, figure out how you're going to manage it. Having that dropped in on the budget system, I think, is completely unprofessional. And I think asking us not only to collude in our own demise, but also to try and find ratepayers' money, reallocate it to pay for this project that I don't recall anybody in SK asking for, is verging on misappropriation of funds enforced upon us.
Thank you. We appear to be getting some sort of consensus, but probably not what the Minister has asked us for. Charmaine.
Thank you very much. Just wearing sort of even a planning hat, this is far more complex, actually, when you start to dig down in the devil in the detail. What will happen, for example, we've got in front of us today a paper on the local plan, and how will that be affected But the plans, we will all have our own local plans. How will they be looked at? Will they be merged? Will the targets for housing across these authorities be merged? Will we stick to the targets for our own areas? What will happen regarding that? There is so much to consider in such short space of time. And where will the areas of development be? Because we might have quite, for example, obviously Grantham is a town. It's got direct links to London. It could be, for example, become a hub of development for the new area, depending on who it is that we partner with. So there are all sorts of ramifications to consider across the entire district.
Thank you for your thoughts. Right, we will now proceed with the agenda before us, which begins with the public open forum. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak? If not, then I will happily proceed to the apologies for absence. I can see we're all here, but has anybody else wanted to apologise for their absence? No? Good. Disclosures of interest. Does anybody have a disclosure of interest?
Potentially item 6.
I thought so. Thank you, Councillor Knowles. The minutes of the previous meeting are on pages 3 to 15. Does anybody have any issues with the accuracy or the content of the minutes of the previous meeting? If not, then I'll ask for a proposer that these are a true and accurate record of the meeting of whatever date it was, 16th of January. Thank you, Councillor Baker, Councillor Knowles. All those in favour of accepting them? All those against, all those abstentions, that's unanimous. Thank you. Right, we now move on to items for recommendation to full council, beginning with the draft budget proposals for 25-26 and the indicative budgets for 26-27 and 27-28, which is a report in my name. So I am pleased to present the budget proposals for next year. I feel like I've got déjà vu because I've already taken them to I've obviously thought about them long and hard, but I've taken them to the joint budget scrutiny group. We've had several conversations about some of the content, including the fees and charges. This report covers the funding settlement overview, the general fund proposals, revenue and capital, housing revenue account, revenue and capital, capital financing proposals, and reserves and balances projections. This has been a lengthy process that started back in October, but it relates our budgets to the content of our corporate plan, which obviously was refreshed during 2023. The proposals have been debated at length by the Joint Budget OSC, and they've also been put out to the public for a full consultation, which is unusual this year in that in years gone by, people have often said that they didn't want to pay more council tax, or perhaps that they didn't think it was a good idea for the council to increase council tax. This year we have had an exceptional increase in the number of responses, as we have with various other consultations, compared to previous consultations of the same kind. We have 767 responses, and more than half, I think more like 65%, support the maximum increase of 2.98% increase in council tax. This would bring our share of the council tax bill to £189.37 for a Band D property, which equates to £3.60 per week for a Band D property. So SKDC services, tell me if I get this wrong, Mr. Wiles, SKDC services cost less than the cost of either parking at Peterborough or the cost of a cup of coffee at Peterborough, £3.60 a week for a Band D property. What a bargain. Since the indicative budget proposals were debated at Cabinet at our last meeting, the final funding settlement has been announced, which unfortunately does not provide any further funding for the Council for 25-26. We are awaiting confirmation of the Drainage Board financial support that Government has agreed to provide, and the reimbursement for national insurance increases is currently not known. However, it is widely expected to be less than the actual cost of NI contributions which the Council will incur. Therefore, I will be grateful if Cabinet can recommend the final proposals to Cabinet for the meeting on the 27th of February. And at this point, I should have done this at the beginning of the meeting, but I am delighted to welcome, alongside Richard Wiles, our 151 officer, David Scott, or are you Dave or David? You're Dave? Dave. I'm delighted to welcome Dave Scott to the post of Assistant Director of Finance and Deputy 151 Officer. He has put in some of the work to this report, and I guess if Mr Wiles will be delegating. I was looking for the word. I probably had some of the same thoughts that you did, Richard. So anyway, welcome to the team, David. You're very welcome, and we're glad you're here. I think you're returning after some period of absence, and we're delighted to see you back again, involved in finance. Great. Now, with that, I'd like to propose these final budget proposals to Cabinet. There was one question which was around, I think we have a recommended amendment that we did speak to you about yesterday, Mr Wiles, around maintenance proposals. Has that been accommodated within the paperwork, or do you want us to propose it from Cabinet?
Yeah, and I think the other item just to consider is the referral of one particular fees and charge element that wasn't approved by Council at the end of January, and you agreed to debate that item today. So whatever the outcome of that debate, we'll need to go back to Council and we'll incorporate it into the Council report for that particular time, which is the Muslim burial charge at Grantham Cemetery.
So we'll discuss the second item first, if you like, and as a portfolio holder, I'll invite Councillor Stokes to say a few words about the issue of interment charges.
Thank you, Leader. Cabinet will have a briefing note regarding the crematorium fees and charges, and in particular Muslim burials. Just for a bit of detail, the Muslim fees have been in being now for 5 years. We've had 4 burials over the entire 5 years. Last year there were a total of 39 burials, full stop, in the process at the crematorium. So because of the fact that I think that the briefing note is very clear, my proposal is that we don't look at that in this financial year, and that we take it forward to the next financial year. We'll have a look at it in 12 months' time or over the next period of time, and we'll leave the fees and charges as they are. I would just like to say there is no, in my mind, discrimination whatsoever in being, and we should take that away from the reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dilsh, you wish to comment?
I just wish to formally second Councillor Stokes' proposal. Thank you.
Do we have any dissent? In that case, we'll take that as per the proposal. Then going back to the first bit, which was around maintenance. Councillor Moran.
Sorry, I'm just wondering when the correct point is for me to ask a question on the supplement we've been provided with on the budget update report and the appendix that goes with it, which includes the finance risk register.
You can only ask that if you give us a page number.
There isn't a page number on it. Oh, it must be 15. Yes, 15 in the supplement.
What is your question?
Well, the first risk is seen as capital programmes requiring borrowing in the medium term, which is... Sorry?
That's the budget, current year's budget update. That's another item on the agenda.
Well, that's why I was asking if it was the right place to talk about it.
I beg your pardon.
It's not.
Yes. Remind me later when we get to that item on the agenda.
I don't know when to remind you.
Well,
'Cause I
when we're on item 9, budget update report,
Right.
I'll remind you. Okay. So, going back to the budget proposals, who would like to say something about maintenance?
So, this is obviously for the Cabinet to consider, but if you were minded to change some of the proposals around reserve movements, it would be recommendation 11, which is to approve the movements in General Fund reserves as set out Appendix C. I believe the proposal is to add a further 2 million into the property maintenance reserve, which is line 9 of the reserve statements, and I would suggest that we take 2 million away from the local priority reserve to bolster the priority, to bolster the property maintenance reserve. And then in the background, we will calculate the implication of that movement between those two reserves. So your item 11 recommendation will be to propose that amendment, and we'll include that in the final budget papers that go before Council.
Thank you. So, one of us may wish to propose that we transfer £2 million from the local priorities reserve, which is currently down as 5.8 million, across to the property maintenance reserve at line 9 on page 37, which is currently at 1.17, which would go up to 3.178 million on page 37. You're the relevant portfolio holder, Richard Cleaver. What do you say?
Thank you, Chairman. So, yes, to give context to this, as the property portfolio holder, members of the Cabinet will have read in other papers about the maintenance strategy and the current situation with the condition survey, and a figure of £5.3 million is showing for the current estimated cost of Category C dilapidations for our non-housing stock, which is obviously a serious problem. And that's been allowed to build up over a number of years, and we are all aware of the fact that we need to do something about it. I would say the Category D is manageable. The existing amount in the current budget is enough, more than enough, a lot more than we need to cover the Category D, which is the worst category of dilapidation. Category C is the next worst category out of the 4. We have 5.3 million. So this is a commitment on behalf of the council to put its house in order in terms of the maintenance of our properties and dealing with a backlog that's been allowed to build up over a very long time. Having said that, this is a commitment by adding money to a reserve. We're not actually updating the revenue cost budget beyond the 1 million for the next year, but we're putting this money into reserve so that we can accelerate and can easily increase that budget as the opportunity arises for us to take on additional new projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knowles.
Yes, I'll second the proposal and say that the welcome expenditure of on maintenance for a council that has neglected some aspects of maintenance over the last few years will be most welcome in many, many areas right across the district, including in the leisure industry, where we have a lot of things that need doing over a period of time, which would benefit from some of this amount. So, our second.
Thank you. I also support, so it should be no surprise that we've had conversations prior to Cabinet, between Cabinet and also with officers about our options going ahead. And we have a large portfolio of buildings which without wanting to repeat myself, over many years, and previous administrations have not been maintained as they should have been. We intend to bring our properties up into a decent state. We want, regardless of the outcome of local government reorganisation, devolution, anything else, we want facilities in our district which are fit for purpose and meet the needs of our residents, and therefore we want to have the money available. We haven't suggested putting the money straight into the revenue accounts because we can't create project managers out of thin air, and for some of the projects they are large and complicated and require procurement processes and so on and so forth, but we don't want the lack of availability of funds to be anything that holds us back. So that is the reason, and I would be happy to explain that to anybody who asks at full council. That, I guess, is an amendment. Does anybody dissent from that amendment? No. So that becomes part of the substantive. I don't want to get into a conversation like we had last week. But that's now part of these proposals. Does anybody want to speak on any other part of these budget proposals for next year? Richard.
Thank you. Just to reiterate how pleased I am that we are not increasing charges for using the bus stations, because we support public transport, and increase in bus services, ditto our market charges, and ditto no increase in the membership fees for our leisure centres. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Mr. Wiles.
Just wanted to clarify for the benefit of those watching at home that the recommendation does include the opportunity to take the maximum council tax increase that's available to us, which is recommendation 2. So that's been put in on the back of the consultation and what's available to us. So the report does talk about the implications if that wasn't taken forward. So just to be clear with members that the recommendation from today would follow through to go on to council for the 27th of February. And just 2 items which are recommendations 13 and 14. The Treasury Management Strategy is the first time that the Cabinet has seen that document. It did go through Governance and Audit Committee earlier in January, and they've scrutinised and reviewed that strategy in line with SIT for Code and best practice. So that's going on to Council for approval, but it's coming through Cabinet today, so it's the first time members here will have seen that. And item 14 is the first time again Cabinet will have seen that document, which is the capital strategy, which sits alongside the Treasury strategy and the capital programme that you're seeking to recommend today as well. So just to make members aware, there are additional documents in this pack that are different from documents that you will have seen at your January meeting when it was the indicative budget. So just to make sure you're comfortable, there are new strategies that you're looking at today as well as ones you've seen previously. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. May I show my ignorance once again and ask about the council tax base? That will be presented to full council. That's not something that needs to come through this Cabinet report now. Came in December. Okay, I remember it well. The council tax. So the council tax base for the authority that needs to be approved alongside the budget at full council on the 27th of February. We've already approved back in December. I remember it well. Okay, so I've proposed these. Is anybody prepared to second this budget proposal? Councillor Cleaver, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Another balanced budget that we're putting through to full council. Now, it is my pleasure to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is going to be the item 7, Councillor Dilks, for the local development scheme.
Thank you, Leader. This is the first of 2 reports I put before you today relating to the development of our local plan review. This first one seeks to update our local development scheme, which informs developers, landowners, residents agents and others of the programme of preparation of planning documents and the key stages along the way where those people and anyone can get involved. Following the adoption of our existing local plan in January 2020, colleagues will know that the Council embarked on a local plan review to address the need for sustainable development across our district up to 2041. In line with our existing local development scheme, the local plan was progressing to Regulation 19 consultation this winter, 24-25. However, on December the 12th, 2024, just gone, the government published its new National Planning Policy Framework, which, among other changes, mandates a higher housing need across South Kesteven District. Consequently, the Council is no longer proceeding with its Regulation 19 consultation. We are required to keep the local development scheme up to date to reflect any changes in the local plan's timetable. Furthermore, in a letter to Chief Planners, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government asked that in light of the changes to the NPPF, the framework, all planning authorities were asked to produce an updated local development scheme within 12 weeks of the publication of the new NPPF, i.e. no later than the 6th of March. Can I thank our planning team, Emma, Shazza, and in fact that entire team for their work in getting this reviewed, which is the review, an updated version is at Appendix A, to ensure that the timetable takes into account the implications of the new NPPF, which we believe is this appendix is realistic and achievable. The revised scheme indicates that an additional Regulation 18 consultation will now be undertaken in summer this year. Regulation pre-submission is scheduled now for winter 24-25 and submission to the Secretary of State of the revised local plan in its draft form by December 2026. This will ensure that the new local plan is considered under the existing legal framework. I request that the Cabinet endorses the revised local development scheme and agrees to it being published on the website prior to the Government's deadline of the 6th of March. Once published, we will notify the Secretary of State through the Planning Inspectorate. All district councillors and the town and parish councils will also be notified at that stage. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for your comments. This is obviously happening at the same time as local government reorganisation, and the two things are related but not particularly helpful to each other in my opinion, and furthermore the change to the rules and the targets for building is an additional complication. However, they call it progress. Councillor Baker.
You took most of the words completely out of my mouth, so it will delight everybody that I'll keep this brief. I want to thank all of the hard work that's gone into this. It is an incredibly technical, very long-winded document, and we have done all of our due diligence, worked in good faith to communicate with our communities how we are going to move forward with planning. Unfortunately, the goalposts have been shifted, and I hope that this is the last time that happens.
Smashing. Thank you for your comments. We've got the Chair of Planning in the room. Do you have any comments, Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, well, I first of all would like to thank all of the officers and members actually involved in this, but I'd like to add, this was in the backdrop to the issues we've had with the severe weather having a general knock-on impact on our general planning process and committee process. So they've had to work extraordinarily hard to get this out, and I think that we really need to recognise that. Thank you so much for the work that's been done.
Thank you, Charmaine. We all echo those comments, I'm sure. So you've proposed this as a...
I did. I'd like to propose it, and thank you for colleagues for comments. Just to say, we were at an advanced stage of the local plan review after a great deal of work. Because of the changes that the government has made, we are now at an early stage in the same process. So we're not starting again, but there's a lot more work that we have to now do to make sure that we meet all the requirements and get sustainable development up to 2041. Thank you.
Thank you. It does feel a little bit like snakes and ladders for officers and members alike, I think. Would anyone like to second this proposal? Thank you, Councillor Councillor Moran. Apologies to both of you. So, with a proposal and a seconder, all those in favour, please. And all those against? Thank you. That's passed. Now, Regulation 18, Draft Local Plan Statement of Consultation. Councillor Dilks.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Following on from the last item, as you will recall and we all know, the Regulation 18 Draft Local Plan was published for an 8-week consultation in February last year. The consultation sought comment on the draft local plan's policies and proposed housing and employment land allocations. That consultation, I'm pleased to say, attracted a positive response rate with over 2,400 comments from 794 respondents. So there's been a massive piece of work sort of putting this together and considering it. Regulation requires local planning authorities to take account of any representations made to them in response to a Regulation 18 consultation. A statement of consultation has now been prepared and completed, and again I thank the planning team for the work in doing this, which documents how the council has engaged with local residents, community groups, landowners, businesses and organisations, and all comments received will be considered as the local plan now evolves. May I request that the Cabinet endorse this statement of consultation and again agrees to it being published via the Council's website. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. So we had 2,439 individual comments received on the draft local plan. As you've just said, we are going to have to go out. Going to go around again. However, this shows that we've been diligent, and thank you to all the officers involved, to Emma and Shazza and Amy and all those involved with our planning process, and also to the 794 respondents that replied to the draft local plan consultation. I've got a question, which is, so we're happy to note the feedback responses, and we are considering approving this draft local plan statement. So if we approve it, then it will become the actual local plan statement of consultation. That's what we're addressing, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it will certainly be the first one. As I say, those people who have already... there will be a new Regulation 18 consultation published at a later stage, but those people who have already responded, will not need to respond again to the same issue. Those comments will be taken into consideration and properly considered as the local plan review moves along its stages.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak to this item? Charmaine, please.
It's a question really, which I'm sure the public will be thinking. Does that mean that there will, obviously comments already made will be adopted, does that mean there will be scope for additional comments to be submitted in the process?
Yes, there will be. But as I say, those comments, people will not have to repeat their interest and their comments on the very draft proposals.
Thank you. On page 100 of the pack and 19 of the document, in paragraph 3.13, it says that details of all new sites arising from Regulation 18 representations can be found in Appendix F. I haven't got Appendix F in front of me. Is this a problem with my pack, or is it a problem with everybody's pack?
Page 114.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Okay, it comes before Appendix E. That's the reason for my muddleness. So, yeah, great. I love Appendix F. Right, we've had a proposer. Have we had a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Moran. And all those in favour of publication? Thank you. That's unanimous. Super. Right, we now move on to the Cabinet Budget Update Report, April to December 2024, which it is my pleasure to introduce. So the report that can be found in your pack presents the forecast position for the current financial year at the end of, as predicted, at the end of December. It's the final forecast report before the outturn position for the financial year is confirmed. So this represents 3/4 of the way through the year. Overall, the authority remains in a strong position with positive variances for both the general fund and the housing revenue account. Investment income continues to perform above budgeted levels as the council has been able to secure good investments at rates above budgeted levels. That's partly down to good management. It's also partly down to the markets. There has been a need to reclassify expenditure for both the general fund and housing revenue account, which was originally intended to be capital expenditure, but is revenue expenditure in nature. Therefore, some of the overspends in both capital programmes is offset by overspends in the revenue budgets. The financing of these spend items remains unchanged, however, so there is no overall impact. We're moving money from one line to another. The money is not disappearing. Finally, a risk register is included which highlights the main financial risks the council is facing, along with the mitigating controls that are in place to control them. Now, Councillor Moran.
Thank you. Okay, page 15 of the smaller supplement. It says capital programmes requiring borrowing in the medium term. It's got high likelihood. It's on a 4 for most likely to happen out of the list that we've got. But in the mitigating action, it says the capital programme can currently be financed without borrowing. So why is it such a high risk if we're not doing it and we're trying really hard not to do it? Why has it got such a huge residual risk score?
Mr. Wise, would you like to take that?
Yeah, the answer lies. The answer lies in what was said. The risk is the medium term. The risk in the medium term is very high because borrowing rates are high and the financing of that debt is not affordable for the council. So the council's short-term strategy is to fund any capital expenditure either from its own reserves or from internal borrowing, which is basically using its own cash balances. That's a short-term solution. That can't be a long-term strategy. So as you look beyond the 3-year programme that you've discussed this afternoon, the medium term remains pessimistic for the council, where it is inevitable at some point it will need to go to the markets to undertake borrowing to fund its capital expenditure in the future. And as we sit here today, the borrowing rates are, just been looking literally this afternoon, they're nudging over 6% at the moment for 50-year PWLB rate, and the council could not afford to finance such a debt. So the medium-term risk is very high. The short-term solution to that is using cash balances as a short-term strategy to mitigate that. Thank you.
Do you have any particular projects in mind when you talk about the need to borrow in the future?
I think that's for council to decide.
So the council will take that on board when we discuss any future capital projects, which we do know there are some things that are going to cost us money. For example, the food waste collection. I'm sure there are others, but there are not many known knowns.
I think within the 36-month timescale of the budget, then we can contain the cost of capital within existing arrangements without needing to stray into external borrowing. But I think if you look beyond that, again, that's predicated by the LGR discussion and also around the ambitions of the council. So then that may push us into looking at external borrowing, but that's beyond the horizon of this budget that you've looked at this afternoon.
Okay, does that...
No, it doesn't, because I suspect Mr. Wiles has unintentionally blinded me with science. What I did pick up was that he's just said that everything we've got planned at the moment for the next 3 years can currently be financed without borrowing. 3 years' time, or very shortly thereafter, we won't exist. So the risk then disappears because it's not our risk. So why is it still considered such a high risk if we've no intention of doing it and we're not doing it at the moment? That's like people being poisoned by oranges when they're not even on the menu.
So what would be the process of challenging the risk register? Would it be something for... I mean it's kindly been put together by the Governance and Risk Officer, and everybody has a different attitude to risk and a different outlook on risk. This presumably is going to full council as... it's going to Governance and Audit on Thursday, isn't it? No? Finance, I beg your pardon, Finance Committee. Perhaps I need to have a conversation with you between now and Finance Committee to better understand why it's red when it seems so far away. I'm also tempted to ask, like, the ceasing to be, the non-existence of South Kesteven District Council is maybe a risk to us, or is it a benefit? I don't know. I don't want to go there. But Councillor Moran, your question is noted, and I dare say that...
Yeah, I'm aware that we've got a lot bigger fish to fry than this particular item, but having just learnt about risk registers and what have you, it's very prominent in my mind that, yeah, okay. I think I've made the point. Thank you.
So this is our payback for sending councillors on training courses. We are keen, we all, 56 of us, are keen to understand what's put in front of us, and I think it's a useful question. Now, Councillor Cleaver, did you want to say anything about... I thought you might want to say something about car parks, but feel free not to.
I'm sure people are bored of hearing me talking about car parks.
I just draw people's attention to Table 2, significant variances on the general fund revenue, car park income. We're doing very well, better than expectations, even with our generous offer of some free parking in the run up to Christmas. Well done us. Right. So, do we need to acknowledge that or approve it? We need to review and note and identify any variances. Do I need to vote on this? I don't think I do. Do I? Are we generally content to note and to say that we've identified any problems? Yes. I'm not going to vote on it. So, great. Good work, everybody. That brings us on to item 10, the Cabinet Forward Plan, which is a lively document that we bring each time to this committee. It could change at a moment's notice, but it's brought to our attention each month to say that we have a Cabinet Forward Plan, and we have no non-key decisions this month. Do we? We don't have any key, no non-key decisions. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts on the Cabinet Forward Plan? If not, then great. With that, are we happy to note the Cabinet Forward Plan? It is noted. And then we move on to open questions from councillors. So we have 3 councillors. Do we have any questions? Elvis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for Councillor Phil Dilks. Firstly, I want to thank Emma for all her hard work and the officers in the planning department. It's regarding Portmonic Way. I've got residents up there that have had development on the housing development up there, and there's been a considerable amount of damage from the putting of the sewage works and everything else, paths being broken, grassway being ruined, hedgerow not replaced, and the residents do feel they're actually feeling left out and they're not being listened to. So my question to you, Councillor Dukes, would you be happy to have a meeting with myself and a couple of the residents up in that area so we can find a solution with the company or Gelson's and getting these things put right to how they were before the development started, please?
Thank you. Microphone.
I'd be very happy to do that, and thank you for the question.
And I will send you the information through email later on today. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you. In a similar vein, I've had further comments about the Towngate East development in Market Deeping. I've got some details, and I will share them with you, Phil, and Mrs. Whittaker after the meeting. But just wanted it noted. Do we have any further questions from members of the council? Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you. This was touched on at Environment OSC yesterday. However, in view of the impact of the flooding, on Grantham, we've done a review of the the emergency planning procedures, and there's a lot of emphasis on the need for town councils, parish councils to play an important role moving forward. Fortunately, not all have been affected by flooding, only some of us have. But I was just wondering if it's possible to have a commitment from SK so that in future we can work in partnership, so that we are working together and we are well prepared should we have any events occur. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and after the recent unfortunate flooding events across the district and the conversations at Environment Committee yesterday, I'm sure we all want to ensure that our communities are well prepared for disasters is probably the right word. Emergencies. We all should be prepared for emergencies. I've got a couple of hands, but do you mind if I take the Chief Executive first?
I think that's perfectly in order, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. I think as members are aware that we're very proactive here at South Kesteven in reference to our response for flooding. Yet again, we are not the flood authority, we're not the Environment Agency, we are the last ones at the end of the phone, if you like. We're bringing out sandbags and trying to be supportive and helping with recovery. The team do offer support, and the Lincolnshire Resilient Forum does also support parish councils and town councils in preparing of emergency plans, and they're setting up certain systems that they need to have. I know the team's been very supportive of a number of parishes around the district, so I'll make sure that Phil reaches out to Grantham Town Council and writes to them about what the offer is and what South Kesteven can do, and also what support's coming from the LRF.
Thank you for that, Chief Executive. Now, I had 2 hands up. I don't know who was first, Richard or Phil. Phil?
Yes, thank you. I think the Chief Executive's taken the words from my mouth. I was simply going to say that, you know, yes, despite us not being the flood authority, from all the work I've seen that's happened in response to flooding in the past couple of years, SK has really punched above its weight And I thank all the officers. I know you got your wellies on when an area in your county division was flooded. I think was it Babette or the previous one, Henk, I can't remember. There's been so many lately, hasn't there? But no, flooding, I mean, it's becoming a big issue. Climate change is, I think is increasing the incidence of flooding, and it's something all of us need to be awake to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cleaver, did you want to say anything?
Yes, just to reiterate the fact that we are very well staffed within the SKDC to support emergency planning and response. We are fully embedded with the Lincolnshire Response Partnership, and we have been encouraging ever since we came to office, parish and town councils to be embedded with us in those processes and procedures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just before we finish, I'd also like, as Chief Exec, just put on note, Chairman, just to thank Phil Swinton for his incredible work that he does for flooding.
Yes, thank you. Phil was working from, I think, 2 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock the following night. During that week, it's a difficult role, and also for all the staff, and we apologise to everybody else in the district who had their bin collections disrupted, and obviously our thoughts go to the people who are still out of their houses because they've been flooded out. So, any further questions from members of the council? If not, then we can then move back to item 6 on the agenda. Councillor Knowles is... so I don't know if we will need to... Councillor Knowles is leaving because of his involvement with Leisure SK as a board director, as is required.
So I'm just looking at the item, the item that's before you is to consider a request from Leisure SK Limited. I don't know if Cabinet have any questions for representatives of the company that might aid your discussion and your decision in relation to this item. So I don't know if Cabinet want to consider whether there are any questions for either Councillor Knowles in his capacity as a member of the board, or Debbie Roberts as chairman of the board, and then making a decision whether you wish to have a discussion in their absence due to their conflicts of interest.
Okay, so I'll ask the rest of the Cabinet that. Do we have any questions for either Mrs Roberts or Councillor Knowles about the gym equipment? No? Okay. The recommendation... Oh, so this is your report. Yeah, I beg your pardon, Paul, I was taking it from you. Paul, tell us all about this agenda item. I'm happy for you to stay, as long as you don't intimidate us. That's fine.
Thank you, Leader. The Board of Leisure SK have identified a requirement to refurbish the gym at Grantham Mears Leisure Centre. The current equipment is approaching the end of its useful life, and as a result the on-site team are experiencing more frequent breakdowns of the equipment. As well as limiting the potential for new customers, if investment cannot be secured to update the gym area and equipment, there is also the potential for members to leave and join other facilities within the local area. The Board have approached the Council to provide a loan to enable the refurbishment to take place, and has submitted a business case which details the likely impact and return on investment. The Council have previously provided a loan to refurbish the gym at Bourne Leisure Centre, which has resulted in an increased number of memberships being sold, which in turn has increased the outcome. At this stage in the Council's budgeting process, there is an opportunity to include the requested loan amount in the Council's capital budget for 2025-26. I would therefore like to propose that Cabinet support the request for a loan, and should this subsequently be agreed by Council, provide delegated authority for the Section 151 officer and myself to agree the repayment terms with Leisure SK.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Do we have any questions? I have a question. In the Officers' comments at 1.1, it said that the sum would be repaid over a period to be determined. Do we know how long the equipment is likely to last, and do we have a view as to how long the loan period should be? That might be a question for Debbie. Oh, a question for, if you can answer it, Paul, then go ahead.
I can answer it, but I'll happily see if Michael collaborates with it. But 8 years.
Sorry, these are Richard Wiles' comments, so he gets first go.
I'm afraid Michael or Debbie can't comment on my comments. Only I can comment on my comments because they're my comments. The actual loan repayment is yet to be agreed, to be frank, because the proposal today is to seek the funding. The actual loan structure will need to be determined between ourselves and Leisure SK, which is both what's affordable for Leisure SK, looking at their cash flow and their financial projections, but also the life of the asset and the maintenance and the warranty within that as well. So there are a few component parts that we need to consider before we can agree the loan structure itself. So that's why there's a delegation from myself and the Cabinet member to put that proposal back to Leisure SK should this get supported by Council. Thank you.
Thank you. So does anybody know the likely life of the asset?
Leader, it's in the report. 8 years is the normal expectation for the life. So my question would be to Richard Wiles is, can you just assure us that the loan, whilst I accept the loan period hasn't been worked out yet, that it will be less than 8 years?
It will certainly be no more than 8 years. Yeah.
Any further questions? No? In that case, with the exception of, well, I would assume that you would either abstain or not put your hand up. Councillor Knowles. So the recommendations as in the report and as presented by Councillor Stokes, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Moran. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? All those abstentions? We have one abstention. Thank you. So that is agreed. And that concludes our meeting for today. Thank you very much for joining us. Same time next month.